This is the first murder in human history. At least that's what scientists think this 430,000-year-old skeleton has to teach us. And while we don't know who committed this terrible crime, what we do know might change your views on human nature forever. Hi everyone, welcome to this channel. Join with us as we uncover the secrets of the past to learn how these mysterious bones tell the story of the first human murder. Now back to our story. Let's start right here. On the northern coast of Spain lies the Sierra de las Majulas mountain range, an ancient landscape full of hidden passages and a history stretching back to the last ice age. It's here that scientists believe the first human being was brutally murdered, with the culprit very possibly being a friend or family member. In the late 1970s, some of these caves were discovered by cavers, but it would take another decade for scientists to realize the true value of these caverns. For tucked away in these subterranean chambers are layers of bones belonging to our earliest ancestors. The discovery was so important it earned this site the title of World Heritage Site from UNESCO. But how did these bones get here? It's believed these bones belong to Homo antecessor, an extinct species of archaic human. They're likely the ancestors of the Neanderthals, who themselves would eventually give rise to us modern humans. These human ancestors lived between 800,000 and 400,000 years ago, and during this time, Earth was locked in an ice age. Ice sheets covered much of Europe, meaning temperatures dropped dramatically, killing off all but the hardiest of plant and animal species. During this time, Homo antecessor lived in small groups across Spain and southern France. Life was tough, food was hard to come by, resources were limited, and because of the lack of farming technology, if your food source dried up, you either went hungry or worse. Some experts believe this extreme environment led to more extreme behaviors, which may have included cannibalism. But when scientists examined some of the bones found in this cave system, they found something else. One bone in particular caught their eye. It was a thigh bone from a young male who had died around 430,000 years ago, and although he'd experienced some sort of trauma to his leg, it was his teeth that really told the real story. His front teeth had been knocked out and then regrown, but not before the tooth fell out, and this process had happened twice. Something had caused damage to his mouth, but he had lived long enough to see the tooth fall out and be replaced with a new tooth. Scientists were unsure if their young victim had been attacked by a wild animal, or if he'd been the victim of another early human attack. But they were about to find some surprising answers. In 2007, researchers were able to extract DNA from these bones. And because they were dealing with archaic humans, they decided to compare the DNA to the DNA of other early human species. The results were a shock. Although they shared a lot of similarities with Neanderthals, they found out these early humans were actually more closely related to us than to Neanderthals. They were actually a completely new species, Homo antecessor, with a lineage leading directly to modern humans. To put it simply, this was a relative that gave rise to Neanderthals and us. Up until this point, scientists had assumed Neanderthals were the direct link between apes and modern man. But now, this new species seemed to fit the bill. Not only that, but this cave contained a wealth of information about these people. There were so many bones here that scientists nicknamed it the Pit of Bones. And within these bones, they found that this group of humans had settled down here on and off for hundreds of thousands of years. It became something like a home base, and even though they probably spent a lot of their time searching for food, it seems like this cave was the place they returned to again and again. And with so many bones, scientists have been able to learn a lot about the lives and deaths of these primitive people. And it was through studying these bones that they uncovered the first ever evidence of murder. What makes this site so important is that it represents a clear snapshot in time. Scientists have estimated that the oldest bones found in this cave date back to 600,000 years ago, while the youngest are 400,000 years old. This means there's a gap of 200,000 years represented by nothing. There's a huge hole in the archaeological record, and it's left scientists puzzled. Some believe that climate change forced these early humans out of this area, never to return. Others think something caused them to abandon their homes. Maybe a rival group of humans drove them out. Whatever the reason, scientists think a combination of factors caused these hominins to go extinct. The exact cause isn't known, but scientists do have a few theories. One of these theories is that Homo antecessor was wiped out because of its smaller brain size. Compared to modern humans, their brains were just a fraction of the size. Another theory is that they couldn't adapt to the changing climate. Whatever the reason, scientists think it's connected to why so many of these bones were found in this cave. It seems this cave acted as some kind of permanent settlement for these early humans. Instead of traveling the land in search of food, they stayed here and hunted whatever they could find nearby. And with so many people in such a small space, it's no surprise that some of them kicked the bucket. What is surprising, however, is how they died. Some of the skeletons show signs of being stabbed or speared, suggesting they were hunted, but by whom? Scientists believe it may have been wild animals. But they also can't rule out the possibility that these early humans were killed by each other, and that's where things get interesting. It's believed that these primitive people had something akin to language, meaning they could communicate complex ideas and thoughts. They also likely had basic social structures. something like clans or families that banded together to survive. But as any anthropologist can tell you, living with other people is never easy. Competition for resources, attracting mates, defending turf, sometimes tempers flare and things can get violent. At first, scientists thought the bones found at the Sima de los Huesos were just the result of a mass casualty event. Maybe a group of humans or animals attacked this camp and killed everyone inside. But as they continued to examine the bones, they noticed something odd. Many of these bones showed signs of trauma, but not all of them. Some looked perfectly healthy, while others had clear signs of injury, such as this individual. Scientists found what appeared to be 2 bullet holes in his skull, suggesting he was shot, except he wasn't shot with a gun. He was shot with a spear. In fact, this wound to the head looks almost identical to a gunshot wound. What this suggests is that these early humans were regularly getting into fights, presumably with each other. And nowhere is this more apparent than in the remains of one man in particular, the man whose death was ruled a murder. Today, this man's skull sits in a museum in Madrid, catalogued as Cranium 17, and if his story was written down in history books, he would be remembered as a martyr, a victim of needless violence. Researchers believe he was around 20 years old when he met his demise, but it's his skull that tells his story. Close examination shows that he suffered from 2 severe blows to the front of his skull. The force of these blows broke his jaw and left him brain dead. If he survived the first blow, the second blow was meant to finish the job. It was a close-range attack, meaning whoever struck him probably stood face-to-face with his victim. But what's most interesting is that the 2 marks in his skull are remarkably similar. This suggests that both blows were delivered with the same object at roughly the same speed and force. It was personal, it was brutal, and it was deadly. All evidence pointed to one thing: homicide. But that's not all. When researchers looked at the rest of his skeleton, they found something even more disturbing. His ribs were broken, his arm was fractured, and his kneecap was shattered. It suggested that he'd been severely beaten before his eventual demise, but that still didn't explain why. Who would want him dead? Surprisingly, no one knows. This is the first murder in human history, but we have no idea who committed this crime or why. For all we know, the victim may have started a fight and struck the first blow, but it's possible his attacker beat him to death. All we know is that the murderer stood over his fallen victim and struck him twice in the head to make sure he was dead. As you imagine those dark torchlit caves 430,000 years ago, picture the moment: a face-to-face confrontation in the flicker of firelight, a weapon raised, a life ended, and the body lifeless, dragged to the edge of a deep black shaft, and cast into the darkness below. Long before kingdoms, before war, before history itself, murder had already found its place in the human story. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and share it with your friends. You can also subscribe for more exciting stories from history.